October 5th, 2009, Councilman Smith, Chairman. I'm joined by Councilman Zine. We will begin the meeting. We are waiting for Mr. Reyes and Mr. Carnes, who are en route. We will hold items number 2 and number 1 and 2 to the end of the meeting, because number 2 we have cards for, and also there may be a need for a public, for an executive session. And Mr. Carnes would like to be here for item number 1. So 1 and 2 will be held to the end of the meeting. We'll begin with items 4 and 5.
John White, City Clerk. Item 4, motion Zion Wesson, directing the Department of Animal Services to report relative to a full accounting of the cooling systems in new and existing animal service facilities, including a plan to correct any reported problems.
The Department. Good morning.
Good morning. Karen Bora of Bureau of Engineering reporting on this issue. During design, we had a climate study that indicated we don't need the misting system in the harbor area. However, after the shelter was open, it was realized that there is a need for it. Therefore, the misting system was installed within a month of the opening. And I understand the Department of Animal Services is now happy with the cooling system at all the shelters.
That's correct.
Ms. Barth, anything more to add to that?
Not really. I think that BOE is capturing it properly. The study was a general climate study of the area and may not have taken into account the specific physical situation of that shelter against a hillside and so forth, which created a different temperature average than maybe the general San Pedro area. So BOE got on it within about 30 days, and before the summer was over, we had a misting system at that location. So we're very satisfied that we have proper cooling in all of our animal care centers.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zion, this is your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question was new and existing. You mentioned the harbor facility. What about the existing facilities throughout the city?
The other animal care facilities, the West Valley location, because the temperature in that study indicated that there would be many, many days of over 100-degree temperatures and also colder temperatures. So those kennels were built as indoor-outdoor to provide air conditioning and heating for the animals. So they have an ability to go outside and be in the sun, but they can also get inside where they have more protection from the elements. All the other animal care centers were equipped from the design stage, from the get-go, from the moment they opened, with misting systems. They've also been retrofitted with awnings so that we can provide shade to, in addition to the misting. So that was all done when the shelters were opened, and all of the facilities are adequate in our view.
Okay, so the new and the existing are all in compliance now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And there was also an issue with the well, this is the misting, the cooling. There was also an issue with the rain. Has that all been corrected also?
Yes, again, through with the help of BOE, we've installed flashing in the back of the kennel, or their contractor has. We've moved those awnings around so that they didn't exacerbate the problem by having the rain drip off where there's leakage. And we went through last year's rainy season. Wasn't as heavy as the year before, but last year we had no problems. The cubbies stayed very, very dry. The radiant heating system up through the concrete is working well at all of our facilities, so we had a good winter last year. The dogs had a good winter.
And there's one more facility to be built?
Yes, it's in design, about to go out to bid, I believe, in the South Los Angeles area, Councilmember Parks District.
That's right.
And we'll make sure that these matters aren't a problem with that facility.
That is true.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
And for the record, we've been joined by Mr. Reyes. Mr. Reyes, from the non-informed, do you have any questions? Mr. Reyes, any questions on 4? Okay, thank you very much. Item number 5.
Direction.
Stay there.
On direction. Receiving file.
Receiving file, I'm sorry.
Item 5, motion Zion Cardenas, instructing the Department of Animal Services to report relative to the types of microchip equipment it uses, the success rate of microchips in reuniting pets and owners, technology used by other animal control agencies, and the estimated cost to equip all animal shelters with the scanners that read universal frequencies.
we're going to put a chip in Mr. Zine? Oh.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Repovich.
Council members, Linda Barth again from Animal Services. Since this motion was passed, the department has actually engaged in a request for proposal process, and it awarded a new contract for microchips. That was the AVID contract, and it was approved by the council last May, and is now signed and in effect. This particular scanner, which I'm passing around to you, is a universal scanner. One of the requirements of that RFP, which the AVID contractor met, was that they provide us universal scanners that can read all microchips. Microchips run in a frequency of 125 kilohertz to 134 kilohertz. Canada and Europe use the 134 kilohertz standard. In the United States, even though there are a couple different manufacturers, they're all at 125 kilohertz. And you have some of the statistics here and some of the sources of this information. Most of the scanners in the United States can only read the 125. Again, AVID has supplied us with scanners that will read any kind of radio frequency. And when you push the button, the particular chip that you have there is not the AVID manufacturer. It's a Canadian manufacturer chip. And as you can see, when you push the button and hold it, it will pop up the number. So those scanners are available to us. The existing scanners we use every day when an animal comes in will show that there's another radio frequency, but will not be able to display the number. So that's when we would go get the universal reader and display the number that way. There's been a lot of conversation about whether or not the frequencies could be unified. That's probably not something that's practically going to happen in the near future because of the European, Canadian standards. That's their standard. They're not going to comply with our standard. But the good news is that there are lots and lots of ways to search out microchips so that if a pet, for example, is picked up at a veterinarian, they may not have all these universal scanners, but they may have a scanner that will at least say to them, we know there's a chip there, or we know what kind of the manufacturer of the chip is, and there are registry tools which allow people to search and try to find out, well, where was this chip manufactured, who was it sent to. So, for example, the city of Los Angeles is fairly progressive in that when we implant a chip in a pet, we also register the chip. So that's part of the overall price that you pay. That means it goes into the registry, and so when that chip is read, anybody in the United States can look up the AVID number and find out who that pet's owner is, a veterinarian and so forth. The County of Los Angeles only implants the chip, and it's up to the person to mail in their information. So if they don't mail in their information, then what happens is if that pet gets picked up by us, we will scan it, we'll see a number, but it won't be associated with a person. Then we utilize one of these registries and find out who issued the chip. We say, oh, this was a County of Los Angeles issued chip from this year to this year. We can contact them, and they can look back through their records to determine the owner. So,
from an empirical data point of view, have we checked to see, do they know what percentage of the people are registering them after they've been told to do that?
I don't know what the county's registration rate is. I know that we get a lot of animals that don't have a name, that only have county registration, and then we work back with the county.
We work backwards.
Yes.
Have we asked the county to try and process like we do, so we'll have that information readily available?
Well, we charge $15 for microchips. They actually, for a while, they had gotten a donation just of chips and not the registration. So they had been giving people free microchips. I don't know if they charge right now or not, but for a couple of years they've been giving free ones, but without the registration.
So this is the chip right here?
That's not an AVID chip. That's a chip manufactured by another provider that I just wanted to demonstrate that our universal reader will read it. I didn't bring an AVID chip.
Is the AVID chip any bigger or smaller than this?
All the chips are really almost not seeable at all. They all come in either like an injection, they come in I've just been informed that the county is requiring them to register with AVID, or is registering them now with AVID. The chips come in some sort of a plastic delivery device that either goes into some sort of an injection device, or the AVID chips actually come in a needle. So every single chip comes in its needle.
So they're that small.
And then they dispose of the sharp right away.
They're tiny then. They're
very tiny.
This kind of startled me. It's not this big. What the heck?
Well, the chip itself is tiny. That's just the...
All right, thank you.
I do have some records that says that right now there's about 14 million pets in the United States that are chipped with the Avid chip, the company that we use. It's the largest company, but not the only one. And 80% of the scanners that are available in the United States to veterinarians and animal control and so forth only read the 125, not the 134 Canadian or European standard. So we're a little bit ahead because we do have readers that will give us those numbers. And if there's any other questions?
Well, could we require the vets in Los Angeles to have a universal reader so people can then reconnect with their animals that are lost? Because you oftentimes see these posters, lost dog, lost cat, and the people give big rewards sometimes. It seems like you have a California license plate, whether you're LAPD or Sheriff Fire Patrol, you can run that system and you get an information. It seems that there needs to be some coordination where anyone could run that and come back with the same information.
Well, again, they'd be able to run it and detect that there was a chip. They just wouldn't be able to get the number. So then they'd have to do this registry deal and try to see if they could determine maybe what chip it is, or get help from an animal control officer. I think that ideally it would be a very good idea for all of the veterinarians, any kind of service that deals with pets, to be able to have these kinds of readers. But they are expensive. I mean, we have a contract with Avid. We pay approximately $9 per chip for the chip and the injection device and the registration. We charge $15 because, of course, it takes us
administrative
human power to inject it too. We get a certain number of these. We have 6 of the universal scanners, so we have one for each location. They're expensive devices. We're provided with them.
How expensive is expensive?
Pardon?
How expensive is it?
I don't know how much this one. I couldn't say how much this one is, but we did talk about buying wand readers and things like that. So they're several $100s per reader. So I guess the question would become, if that were a mandate for veterinarians, how would it? I think the question would be cost. I'd be willing to bet any veterinarian would like to have.
Do many veterinarians actually have those? I mean, do they take in lost animals that much?
The veterinarians?
Yeah.
I don't know what the rate of that would be. That's something we'd have to explore.
I would just think not many vets would take in somebody, walk in the door and say, hey, we found this dog. They would probably call you.
Probably.
But if they want to then adopt that animal, and they take that to the vet to get checked out, and then the vet puts a chip in, that chip can't be read by other vets in some cases. We need to somehow have a universal system where it's all connected, where the chip in, whether you folks put it in or the county puts it in or a private vet puts it in, there needs to be some kind of a central system that it can be checked to find out who that owner is, because animals are lost all the time. The fires that take place, animals get displaced. We want to reconnect them with their owners. It seems cumbersome if the vet doesn't have that equipment, and then they have to contact animal services, and the person doesn't register it because they haven't taken the time where you folks do it automatically. It just seems to be a disconnect to try and reconnect these animals with their rightful owners, since there's some bog down with the different systems.
Perhaps I didn't make clear about the systems. Within the United States, most of the chips and most of the scanners are readable. Whether the person necessarily registers or whether a veterinarian or an animal control might have to go to one of these registries to determine who sold the chip and then work backwards to try to identify the owner. The reason that we have the universal, that this is important, is because if animals are chipped in Canada or Europe, they wouldn't necessarily be readable. But locally in the United States, and there's a lot of effort, in fact, all the other major AKC, in fact, I think this was an AKC chip, and Home Again, so there's sort of 3 major players, for example, that were interested in our request for proposals. They all have co-readable scanners within the 125 kilohertz.
So it's just animals from other countries.
That's
may be
where
a problem.
A reader like this is what's important.
Okay.
Ms. Park, we have some sort of not a group or whatever that's composed of veterinarians, don't we? That we talk to them on. Yeah. What is the group? What is the group? The what?
The Southern California Veterinary
Association.
Medical, yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to assuage Mr. Zine's concerns if we could ask them if they have any recommendations.
Yes, we certainly can. I do think that they do talk about chips. Chips are something that there was a recent survey of veterinarians, and veterinarians are actually more likely to recommend a microchip to a pet owner before maybe they even mention a dog license, as far as providing safety and security for the pet owner that their pet will be found if it's lost. So I think, generally speaking, vets are very supportive of it, and we could certainly talk to them a little more about what's going on in the industry, and if they feel that they've got enough resources with these registries and the readers and so forth that are available.
And if someone loses a pet, someone finds a pet, and that pet's taken to a shelter, the shelter automatically scans to see if they've got a reader?
Immediately. That's the first thing that happens before they do any other registration of the animals, determine if it has a chip.
Are we coming up with a good percentage of those that have chips?
I don't know exactly what the percentage is of chipped animals. I know I picked up a dog in my neighborhood yesterday and took it in, and he was chipped. So they were going to call the owner right away.
So then they don't give a reward, they just say thank you, well, that's just okay. Another question I have, this motion that I introduced was October 2nd, 2007. That's 2 years ago. You know why it's taken 2 years to get this to committee? And the other one is...
Yeah, I know.
Wait, before you do that, I just want it for the record. The other one is July 2nd, 08. July 2nd, 08. Why is it taking so long for these motions to get to a committee hearing before they go to council? Mr. Smith, you know the answer.
Yeah, and the answer to that is not the department's fault. It's the former chairman who just held things. And we're trying to clean things up here, so we're going to be accelerating a lot of files up to the committee over the next few months that we're just sitting in.
So this was ready to go a long time ago?
Yes, and we did report some of this information when the contract, for example, came to council for approval, because we did know there was an interest on the part of the council.
Thank you.
Mr. Reyes?
I have a follow-up on that.
And for the record, we're joined by Mr. Cardenas.
Thank you. Sorry about that. A follow-up on that question. What is the procedure? Say you have a motion, you gather information, you do some research, you look into what's been going on, you get some answers, et cetera, and the department seems to be ready to come forth to the city council. What is the procedure that the department has to go through, or custom and practice with the department before they could come to a council committee?
Generally,
as far as layers of who to check with or get sign off or get the okay to go over to the council meeting?
I think a lot depends on the nature of the request, but generally speaking, we would get a motion like that, and then we would, as you said, do the research and prepare a letter or some sort of a report. Again, it might be as simple as a short letter and a fact sheet, or it might be a more complicated report, and send it forth to the committee. And then if we're ready to go and ready to give you that information because we want to proceed, we might contact the chair's office and the chief legislative analyst and work within the city clerk and recommend to them that we're ready to go if this can be agendized.
So it's just the CLA, CAO, et cetera. So nothing gets run by the mayor's office, or no deputy mayor or anybody pops in and says, hey, how's it going, folks? Well, how's that motion? None of that goes on?
Well, they might help us keep it going, yes. But generally, if we get a motion, what we do is we work on preparing a report, again, whether it's something elaborate or something simple. And then when that report is prepared, we send it forward. If a motion requests us to do some sort of an action that might need to go to our Board of Commissioners, then we would take that step. So go to the Board of Commissioners and then send that forward.
Based on what you just said, it appears a bit irregular for the mayor's office to get involved with okaying something before it's ready for public discussion like this.
Well, I think that there are cases in which there are things of the general public concern that go to our Board of Commissioners, and maybe there's some sort of an action or a muni code change recommendation or so forth, and those, after our board acts, they do in fact go to the mayor's office, and then they go to the clerk for agendizing. So a lot depends on how the request is coming to us.
So pretty much the only things that go to the mayor's office are the things that go to the commission?
Generally speaking, yes.
Okay. But you do have various items that you would report back to committees like this that don't have to go to commission for any kind of vote or whatever?
That would be correct. And they would just come back as a written report to you, or in this case, maybe an oral report.
Who's the person in the mayor's office that your department works with the most?
Our liaison is Jim Bickart.
Jim Bickart. So would you say that he's the one that your department has the most contact with when it comes to the mayor's office?
Yeah, he's the one we would work. Our direct liaison, yes. Okay.
when it comes to universal readers, what is that, and do we implement universal readers on the chips?
We have a set of universal readers. You want to?
Yeah, you didn't get to play with it. We put one in Ms. Bazine's ear. You can try it.
This is how about quorum issues?
So, what happens is,
It's registering.
I have, my wife has this.
It said defective.
Now, as far as we can tell, can the city of Los Angeles make some kind of requirement or something for veterinarians who put in chips that reside and have licenses to do such in our city?
We discussed that. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Although I think it could be something that be required, it's a financial impact for veterinarians to, particularly to have universal readers. One thing that's important is that veterinarians, there are only a couple chips manufactured. They are all 125 kilohertz in the United States. It's only outside the United States where they're a different frequency. That's a little tougher for you to be able to read the number of the chip. And most veterinarians do sell chips, and they do have a reader which, although it may not give them the number of every chip manufacturer, will tell them there's a chip there. And then there's a sort of a little fact sheet I have here, some registries where the veterinarians can then go and determine who originally sold the chip, and then they can work backwards to find ownership. But most chips, there is a push to have certainly that all readers can tell that there's a chip there, if not read the number. 80% of the scanners in the United States do read 125 kilohertz, but may not read the Canadian. And about 14 million pets have AVID chips, probably the most of any chip manufacturer at this time.
So 80% of 14 million seem to be readable by the system we have in LA.
No. 80% of the scanners that are out there owned by vets or anyone will only read basically American frequencies and not Canadian or European. But then some organizations like ours, we have some readers that will universally read everything, and that's the one the sample you had.
Okay. All right.
It's $15 for someone to have their pet chipped at the Animal Services Department.
As part of an adoption. If they come in and they just want to chip their animal as an alternative to going to the vet to do it, it's $25, which is about half what a veterinarian charges.
So that's about $50 for that? So, but the public can take their animals to Animal Services Shelter and get that done?
Yes.
For
As a matter of
20
fact, we promote that too. Sometimes if we have like a vaccination, we then also sell licenses and promote microchip.
Okay. Can they have any other services at Animal Services for the pet?
No. There are vaccination days. Well, they can get vouchers for spay-neuter. Yes.
So other than spay and neuter and the chip, is there anything else?
No, not on a regular basis.
Save the money from going to a vet. It's going to obviously charge
Well,
you
we
more.
do have a lot of low-cost. In fact, some of our locations once a month have a low-cost spay-neuter vaccination day,
Okay.
which we're doing in cooperation with the Southern California Medical Association. And we try to advertise those heavily. We have an annual schedule of those, and we get very good turnout for those.
Okay. Just to try and save the consumer some money.
Absolutely.
Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When we look at the notion of accessibility and who's actually using the chip, do we have enough information within our city departments to know where it's being used and who's using it?
Which animals are getting their pets microchipped?
Right.
We don't have that information, no. I mean, we know every animal that we adopt out, and most animals that we redeem back to an owner, obviously they've lost it, so we encourage them to purchase a microchip, and many of them do.
Is there a database that's being built or designed to understand who is actually participating in this effort?
Well, the manufacturers like Avid or Home Again, they have an international data, or a national, could be international database of who are the owners of the chips.
No, I understand
with
that, but
registers.
I'm
We
asking,
don't.
why wouldn't we?
Well, we have our owners, so we can provide, for example, statistics on people who've adopted pets and who have microchips, because every adopted pet has
So
one.
it's safe to say that there's a pretty big gap between the animals, the pets that are out there versus who's getting the chips. And what I have in mind is the notion of, I guess the best analogy would be the digital divide. There's populations out there that have access to computers. There's population that don't, for all the obvious reasons. Is this going to be the same phenomenon when it comes to chips, and who's actually using them and who isn't, and who needs them, and who requires support to get to them? Is that going to have, we're going to have those same dynamics occurring with this particular technology?
There will be similar dynamics in that it costs extra. So people who are getting, a dog from a neighbor, that kind of thing, they might not go to the expense of getting the microchip or be aware of the technology. I would say that because we serve everyone in Los Angeles, and we have from, very high economic areas to lower economic areas who come to us because it's a great place to get a great pet for their family that can't go to a pet store or some more expensive alternative. We probably have a uniquely equal distribution of pets with chips because they've been adopted over the years from our animal care centers. I think it's probably a information and a resource, or to some extent an expense, but mostly just a knowledge divide.
Is there any effort from the industry to look at that gap so that there's more access for more individuals who might not afford it?
I think that there's a lot of push on the part of the manufacturers and also veterinarians to promote microchipping as a relatively inexpensive, good way to make sure that your pet always gets back to you. I know that, as I mentioned, there had been a veterinarian survey done by the Found Animal Foundation, and they found that vets were more likely to recommend a microchip even than a license for people who are concerned about making sure they get their pet back.
Well, I'm just thinking about the city, and I believe, if I'm correct, about 5 to 6 council districts have 40 to 55% poverty levels in their districts right now. And they happen to be the areas that have the highest concentration of people, which seemingly creates the highest concentration of pets or animals that are abandoned.
That's true.
So within those facilities that are in these districts, are we looking at being proactive and stimulating these access to these chips?
I don't think, I can imagine the sort of campaign and public outreach that I think that we would desire to do. I don't think on a regular basis we do it. Like I said, in connection with vaccination and some of the, those kinds of special event activities, we really push microchip.
It's part of the program, right?
Yes, but on a regular and ongoing basis, I think that we would like to be able to have the resource and the personnel to do more in cooperation with vets and so forth, but we are a little resource constrained, particularly on the outreach public education, where we have no expert staff in that area at all, so we...
Well, Mr. Chair, if it's, if we could have a report back on what type of programs and how do we look at this database to understand what is the gap, if you will, given the programs that are being conducted, and comparing the high number with actual pets that are being engaging in this CHIP program. I'd just like to see the gap, and if maybe there's a way in which we could be more proactive with our neighborhood councils, with our different advocacy groups. Maybe there's a way to increase that number, especially in those areas that have these high poverty levels, and see if that's something that we can work through. Because otherwise we'll just leave it to chance and those who are economically capable of doing this. And I think it leaves a big hole, a big gap in our city. So if we can just understand that.
You want that to come back from staff, or you want the commission to take up the discussion?
Well, what would be most effective?
Ms. Barth?
Well, I actually think that maybe agendizing this as discussion with our commission would be not necessarily that there would be a formal action, but it would probably be a useful discussion in that venue, get some public input, get the commissioner's idea, and at the same time, some of it will be staff research to see if there's any existing statistics out there that could help us describe what that gap might be.
Okay.
So I think it would be a mix. So if we could have some time to kind of do all that sort of research.
Yes, it's just in the spirit of being proactive and knowing what doesn't exist out there. But thank you very much.
90 days, 120 days, what's?
Yes, at least 90, that'd be great.
120? Give you 120.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. So we'll add that, and also in that discussion, we'll just have a discussion with the veterinarians, see if they have any recommendations, how we can bring some more uniformity to the system. That'd be grateful. Right, so that will be the order, then we'll hold that on back in committee, Mr. Yes, I understand that. So we'll send that back to committee with those recommendations. We have a public testimony from Phyllis Doherty and Jeff De La Rosa.
Phyllis Doherty with Animal Issues Movement. Councilman Reyes will be very happy that I'm doing Dr. Vasquez's website right now, and one major thing on it will be microchipping in Spanish and English. That's going to be I'm covering everything that we need for our community to make sure that it's user-friendly for the residents. On the vets and microchipping, most vets do have a universal scanner. There are issues with scanning in terms of a vet. There's privacy as to giving out the personal information on the individual that might be registered. That's one of the reasons that they don't do that. Whoever's working in their office does not have the same legal obligations that an employee does at the department in terms of the privacy of the individual. So the vets do not give out that information, and also they cannot verify the accuracy because people may get a dog and not realize that they have to change the microchip. So now they have identified an owner, and that's not the owner. So vets have to be very, very careful. It's not the same as a shelter. If they believe there's a problem, then they contact the shelter and tell the shelter, we have an animal that is identified to someone else. There's something about the quality of the animal or something that I think we need to check and make sure that this is the owner. They can always do that. Large breeders tend to register them with the chips, but they do not put information in on the owner. So you get some dog that's chipped, but there's no identification at all, and that's not common, or is very common. The owner may not register, like I said, the new address. There's another thing. There's a disadvantage with chips also. That if you get a dog, if you're a rescuer or someone that gets a dog or the vet has it come in, the dog is in horrible condition. But it is microchipped to someone. They are the legal owner. You cannot go ahead and take action regarding that dog. You have to go through a process of writing letters, of trying to contact them. They don't get back to you. So now you've got a dog that maybe has been used in dogfighting, whatever, and that is the legal owner. And trying to go through a process to get that animal transferred over so that you can do something good with it, it can be very, very cumbersome. So we need to address that.
Thank you. And obviously, those issues will be brought up to the commission, and thank you. Mr. De La Rosa?
Good morning. Jeff De La Rosa. I'm a dog owner and also an animal rescuer. Mr. Reyes brings up an interesting point of economics. Ms. Barth states that it costs the department $9 for a microchip. They sell the microchip for $15 if you adopt an animal from them. But if anyone off the street brings in their animals, $25. I don't see a reason that we need a 300% markup on microchipping. I'm sure we'd all like to see every animal in Los Angeles microchipped. I think that the department should be asked to lower that fee to make it more possible for more people to microchip their dogs. Mr. Zine brings up an interesting point about veterinarians. In the last 10 years, I've probably had over 100 veterinarian visits with over 25, 30 dogs. Never once has a veterinarian, 10 different veterinarians, ever scanned any animal that I brought in. Personally, I'm looking for 3 dogs that were stolen from me, 3 dogs stolen from someone else. They all have microchips. We can't find the dogs because they do need medical attention. They don't get scanned when they go to the vet. So Mr. Zine's idea that requiring a veterinarian to have a scanner is fine, and most of them do, but requiring them to actually scan the animals that come in would be an interesting ordinance to consider. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Ms. Barth, I hope you'll take both of those comments back to your commission for further discussion. All right, then the order will be that this is held in committee until report back in 120 days. Thank you. Continuing on the Zine theme, we'll go to item number 3.
Item 3, motion Zine Cardenas relative to Department of Animal Services policies regarding found, seized, or otherwise impounded animals and the procedures in place to reunite them with their owners, including a plan to correct any security deficiencies that may lead to the theft of animals that are held at city shelter facilities.
Good morning, Chairman Smith, council members. My name is Kathy Davis. I'm with the Department of Animal Services. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. Out of the approximately 66,000 animals that were impounded in the last 12 months, Most of those pets were either picked up by our officers or turned in by their owners. A small number of those pets that came in, about 1,000 of them last year, came in through an intervention with LAPD due to the fact that the owners were either arrested, the owner might have been hospitalized or died, and also through what we call evidence animals that were pending a cruelty investigation by our officers. All the pets that come into our custody are immediately scanned for a microchip, as Ms. Barth pointed out earlier here, or checked for tags to identify their owner. If a microchip or ID is found, then obviously our staff immediately contacts the owner by phone, and a follow-up letter is also sent. I just wanted to make you aware that last week we had a pet that did come in, and we scanned it for microchip and found out when we called and contacted the owner that the pet had been missing for 7 years.
Wow.
So there's great value in those microchips, and obviously that pet owner was very happy when they came in and were able to reclaim their pet.
It's like cold case for animals.
Very cool, very cool. In the past 12 months, more than 4,700 pets were reunited with their owners. Once a pet is in our custody, they're placed in locked cages or kennels. We also have locked doors to our medical and isolation areas, and our keys are very limited, and they're very closely guarded. We also do a daily inventory on all of our pets to ensure that obviously all pets are accounted for so that we can follow through on our security measures. And in the past 12 months, out of our obviously huge inventory of animals coming in, only 3 of our pets were stolen. And while certainly we never want any pet to be stolen, we haven't had a pet stolen since January of 2009. We have a standard operating policy for any pets that are stolen, missing, or not accounted for within our centers, and that policy does require that we immediately contact the police and have a police report filed for it. There's also an internal review that's done that's required to be written and filled out and filed with our supervisors, and that includes recommended action to be taken if there are any corrective measures or weak measures that are pointed out within the review. As I mentioned, January 2009 was the last time that we had a dog stolen. That particular event involved a volunteer and a community service worker. The community service worker was cleaning the cage where the dog was impounded. A volunteer came up and advised the community service worker that they would be taking the dog for a walk while the cage was being cleaned. And between the two of them, the dog came up missing. We did obviously contact the police department. Police department came out and filed a report for us. They also interviewed both the community service worker and the volunteer. That case is still pending. It has not been closed out yet by the police department, so we're still awaiting to see if any charges obviously are going to be filed. The volunteer is still with us. We've had no repeat incidents, no further incidents at our North Central Center where this happened. Community service worker has since completed her hours of service and no longer is a part of our group. And just a brief mention, we do have security systems at some of our centers. We have 6 centers that are open to the public. Our South LA Center has 2 cameras, one in the lobby and one in the loading area. Our West LA and Harbor Centers had cameras in their old existing facilities that they brought over to the new facilities, and those are installed in the gate and receiving areas. We do have the 4 additional centers that do not have any kind of security or surveillance equipment within the centers. About a year and a half ago, we received an estimate from RD Systems to find out obviously how much it would cost to install security systems, and it was about $50,000 to $100,000 per center. So the cost obviously was a bit more than we could spend at this particular moment. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Mr. Zine, your motion?
You mentioned the community service worker. Is this someone who's doing volunteer instead of going to jail?
They're assigned hours by the court system, and they were there to work off their hours.
And do you screen as to what their charges were?
Yes, when they come from the court system, we're provided a sheet of information that tells us exactly what their issue was, and we do have the ability to send them back if we feel that their charges or whatever it is that they've been convicted of are things that are not suitable for them to be within our facilities.
And the individuals involved in this theft of the dog, what was their charge?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information in front of me. I'd be happy to get that for you.
I'd be curious to see what they were charged with when it comes to doing community service work in a facility, and if they were charged with something that could have been associated with theft of an animal.
Yes, sir.
And also the facilities that have video, do they make a tape and they can go back and check the tape, or is it just monitored when someone's sitting there watching the monitor?
No, they do have a tape, and we do go back and review the tapes when there's problems.
And the situation that occurred with the volunteer and the community service worker, have there been any other thefts or missing animals associated with volunteers or community service workers?
Not to the best of my knowledge, not in the 3 incidents we've had in the past 12 months.
Okay, how about prior to that?
I didn't go back and review the cases from the prior year. I can only speak to those 3 that I did review, and no volunteers were involved.
Okay. Because the breach of security is obviously of concern, and that we have adequate security. Are the facility staffed 24 hours a day?
Yes. I will tell you, Councilmember Zine, that when this particular incident happened, the minute that we noticed that obviously the dog was missing, the staff immediately locked down the entire facility, closed the front gate, made sure that obviously nobody else could leave the premises, did an entire search of the premises to try and locate the dog, and obviously came up absent the dog. So at that time, then the police were called out. So we do have a protocol that we go through any time a pet is reported missing.
And what kind of dog was it?
It was a Yorkshire Terrier.
Are those considered valuable?
Yes, sir.
So there would be an incentive for someone to steal a dog like that?
Yes, sir. We had several people ask when this dog was going to be available, and it was within a locked area of the facility, so we felt comfortable that it was being held appropriately. Unfortunately, we may never know who took the dog.
But somehow it appears it was internal,
It would
meaning
certainly-
someone didn't break in the place.
It would certainly appear to us that, yes, sir, it was either the volunteer or the community service worker, and they've both been interviewed by the police department.
And that case is still pending?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cardenas?
Thank you. How many lawsuits do we have pending when it comes to the department finding themselves in this situation with a dog that somebody felt should have been returned to them? And it wasn't?
I'm not aware currently that we have any lawsuits pending. I do know that in this last incident, we did advise the person that they could obviously go through our risk department and file a claim against the city for obviously the missing dog.
Now, I hate to sound crass, but by law, what is a dog or a cat, a pet considered? Personal property?
Yes, sir. It's considered
So
property.
it's under the law, it's personal property.
Yes, sir.
So basically, it's just like if somebody impounded a car or what have you, and all of a sudden it's missing, nobody could find it or what have you, somebody could sue the city and say, hey, I'm going to sue you based on the value of that property, personal property that was in your possession and you've lost it, what have you.
Yes, sir.
So that being the case, is the department aware of what kind of risk there is involved, that is involved with the city, and what kind of cases have happened in New York or Chicago or Beverly Hills or what have you, where a city or a municipality found themselves having to contend with the courts on, or some kind of settlement as to, for example, what if Jaja Gabor is, I don't know if she's still alive, but anyway, when she was around, or if she's still around, I mean, you know, she's pretty ornery when she gets upset, and I'm sure she can afford lawyers or what have you, and I have a feeling, I think I've seen her on TV, how much she loves her animals. If we were to find ourselves in possession of one of her dogs, all of a sudden she comes to retrieve it and it's gone, I would imagine we'd be slapped with a lawsuit quicker than you could say she could actually do so. That being the case, I mean, what results have we seen when it comes to liability on these matters?
Personally, I haven't seen a lawsuit that's been filed for a pet in my short career here with the City of Los Angeles. In my past experience, primarily they've gone through a safety and risk department filing, and Primarily, they've asked for the citizens to turn in a receipt for what they paid for the dog, what they feel is appropriate, and it's been negotiated through there. I haven't seen large lawsuits as a course of that. I'd be happy to do some research to see what's happened out in Los Angeles with regard to it, unless Linda Barth has.
Yes, Linda.
Let me just jump in. I have been working as the risk manager, the point of contact for claims for animal services for about 3 years. And we have received one claim for an animal that the department euthanized after they had turned it in because it was very sick. And then there's this particular situation with the lost dog that Interim General Manager Davis has been telling you about. But we have not received any, we have not, since I've been here in the last 3 years, had any lawsuits for lost animals or animals euthanized or animals adopted to the wrong person. We've been able to work those out in those rare situations where something happens.
Okay.
That's in my experience in 3 years.
Okay. What I'd like the department to do is talk to our city attorney's office, and maybe they can look at some cases or what have you and see what the potential risk is. Because whenever these kinds of things happen, we may be the first big city to find themselves on a lawsuit. And I'm just wondering if the case has shown that it's based on what was mentioned earlier, the receipt of the dog or the value of the dog, street value or what have you. Because unfortunately, what we may find ourselves in a situation is that people aren't willing to settle with that. They want to go to court. They want to go in front of a jury or however the courts would handle this kind of thing on lost personal property. And they may be talking about $100 million. Because to some people, these are members of their family. And if you have somebody who is a billionaire, and we find ourselves battling with a billionaire, maybe another city has had to battle with a billionaire over one of their family members, as they consider them, that they feel that the city has lost that animal or euthanized it or what have you, and they want to take it all the way to the Supreme Court to prove that municipalities should take it so seriously that it should never, ever, ever happen again. Okay.
We'll be happy to do that research.
Okay, we have two public comments, the tag team of Doherty and De La Rosa.
Not the law firm.
Not the law firm, no.
Phyllis Doherty, the Animal Issues Movement. The nature of our work, we deal with this type of thing a lot. And an animal, the cost of personal, or the value of personal property of a dog is $15 or cat now. Unless it's a dog, like I said, so it's petty theft, grand theft if it's over the 400 or 800 or whatever the amount happens to be. The thing that keeps you from having these major lawsuits, basically, is that we have an obligation to keep our pets safe. It is not the department. When the department picks up the animal or an animal control agency gets the animal, they have done that as a service, but the obligation still lies with the owner. So if the owner has allowed the animal to get out and they have not taken care of it, their case is weakened immediately. So that's why you don't run into all of this, because that's what everybody looks at first. That you had an option to take care of your pet, and if it was your family member, you should have done that. And some of them do get out. And the department does have them, but there's a problem in all shelters with theft. It's minimal in the city of Los Angeles. The county had to actually install cameras over 10 years ago because it was so bad. It's especially bad with fighting dogs, evidence animals, where the owner wants them back, and it almost always is involved with someone on the inside, and usually it's a volunteer. So since the department's taking care of that, their chances of having, anything really serious happen are minimal.
Thank you very much. Mr. De La Rosa.
Thank you. Jeff De La Rosa. I have personal experience with the Yorkshire Terrier that was stolen. And from what I know, when the department knew the dog was missing, they made no attempt to contact the owner, and they knew who the owner was. This was not an evidence animal. There was no animal cruelty investigation. The woman was evicted from her apartment for having animals. The department impounded the animals until she could retrieve them. I think it was almost 10 days after the animal was stolen that she showed up to retrieve the animal and then was told that the animal was stolen. So there are some holes in the procedures. Secondly, I helped her file a claim with the city regarding the theft of the animal. And the procedure is the city has 45 days to respond, no response, which means she can sue. Well, she didn't have any money to sue. It seems as though in this particular case, and there are not a lot of stolen animals, the department could have said, what was the animal worth to you? Let us help you become whole again if we can't supply you with the actual animal, which was a certified, permitted emotional support animal for this woman. So it's a very sad story. I don't think we'll ever find the dog, and we're not going to have LAPD find the dog. They don't have the time and the resources. So as far as statistics go, 3 animals stolen a year, maybe 3 animals that they know who they belong to. But if you look at the statistics of the department, and if you include all of the animals that they take care of, including turned in, however, it's more than 3 that are missing, stolen. Animals walk out of the shelter mysteriously often, and it's not 3. Maybe 3 that we knew who the owner was. But where are all these other animals going? So cameras are what we need.
Hold on, Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Mr. De La Rosa. What is your contention with a department waiting a day or 2 or 10 days before the owner realized that their dog was lost? Is it for emotional reasons or for that the owner could have helped somehow in finding the dog?
I think that, for one, the department should admit we made a mistake, one, and let the owner know
In that case, did they let the owner know?
Not until she showed up to pick up the dog.
No, but excuse me, did they let the owner know, or did they lie about it until finally the owner figured it out themselves?
No, they told her when she came to pick up the dog that it had been stolen.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No questions? Any recommendations?
Well, if we're talking about video, we're talking about a major expenditure, we're talking about observing the people, the community service workers in particular, and making sure that they're in a proper position while they're doing their community service. When you're dealing with volunteers, community service workers, there's a risk factor. I don't know how we can correct that situation other than closer supervision by animal services personnel that someone's going to steal. We know that people steal from banks, people steal from churches. A lady was just arrested who was stealing ladies' purses during the services at a church service. So there's thieves, and if it's a theft, hopefully the police can find something out. I don't know, other than the video operation in all the shelters, anything short of that is realistically put into place.
What about, and maybe the department could look into this, you know, when you go to a store and you take something out of the store that's got a chip in it, it sends off a buzzer if you go through the door. What could we put, you know, when you go to a concert or something, you get a little wristband. Could we get some sort of cheap plastic wristbands that you use as a collar on the animals, that if they went through the door and the collar wasn't removed properly, that would set it off? Or?
I'd be afraid of somebody throwing a dog over a fence and the dog getting hurt.
Yeah.
Well, if someone's going to steal, they're going to steal. That's the problem. You're talking about not a dog that...
But you harden the target.
The dog didn't escape. The dog was stolen. And that's an issue that...
Yeah, but if you had that attitude, stores wouldn't bother putting those theft devices on stuff because people are going to steal it anyway. So you can harden the target, make it harder to do.
Harden the target's the idea.
Well, then I'll ask the department if they could report back on the different methods, why reinvent the wheel, the different methods that other departments within the United States have, what they've implemented or tried to implement, and also the cost factors. For example, the wristband or neckband buzzer thing at the door or what have you, or putting something around the perimeter, what's the cost of that kind of measure versus cameras, et cetera. Obviously cameras, I mean, both of you work with the police department, Smith and Zine, and you know a lot about what kind of activity goes around there and what kind of requirements there are to cameras. It's not just having the camera, it's having to monitor the camera, how long you save the data and the information, and who's going to monitor. Is it going to be live monitoring? Is it going to be recorded monitoring, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? All of that is money. And what was the augmentation to the department this year in your budget?
$3 million.
Augmented?
Oh, no.
Decrease.
Deficit.
Oh, okay. All right.
No augment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, nobody
All
can.
right. Okay. Yeah, but that's my point. That's my point. Unfortunately, we're looking at a cost factor no matter what, and at the same time, we're looking at tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands of animals a year being handled by our department, and we're cutting them $3 million, and legitimate complaints if one dog is lost. That's one too many, but when you look at the ratio factor, I'm sure that at clothing stores, for every 10,000 units of clothing, they probably are seeing people try to maybe steal 500 pieces or what have you. So, again, I don't want to diminish in any way the value of an animal, but the fact of the matter is we'd be kidding ourselves or just trying to impress the public if we were to pretend like we're going to find the money and implement it. But what we should know, and that's why we should have a report back, what we should know is, should we come into a position where we find that we have to do something, at least we'll know what the cost is, at least we'll know what the benefits are, at least we know whether or not they're effective. I mean, we may be talking to a place like Houston or Chicago, and they say, yeah, we implemented cameras and recorded 12 missing animals before we did so, and we've had a running total of 8 or 9 a year still missing even after the cameras. So with all due respect, then you're looking at an improvement of 3 animals a year. Maybe they spent $150,000 in initial cost or $1 million in initial cost, and they have an ongoing cost of several $100,000, a year for an improvement of 3 animals. So those are the kinds of, that's the kind of report that I would like to know. Not only what it costs, but did it make a difference?
You know, the other factor is some animals are more at risk than others of being stolen. Some animals are obviously more popular than others being stolen, and maybe something can be done with tighter security for those particular animals.
Well, then they're going to sue us for discrimination.
Well, animals are not involved in discriminatory practice yet.
Even
But
the
just
state
say,
attorney's office is laughing.
when we book property, we book narcotics a different way than we book currency. And we book guns different than we book found bicycles. And if we were to secure those in another secure area, same thing with prisoners. Felons are segregated from misdemeanors. There's more security on that. So maybe something can be done in-house with those animals that are of greater value than others to keep a closer watch, or that the community service workers can't have access, or the volunteers can't have access to those particular animals. That might be something in-house that they could do to tighten it up. I don't know how many exotic animals you have or high-value animals, but I would estimate or guess that they're not stealing the animals that aren't of high value. They're stealing those high-value animals that they can sell. So that might be an option you can do in-house and not cost any money. So if we can get a report back on that, along with Councilmember Cardenas' ideas, but you're not going to get any more money, so you're going to have to do it without money. So that's not going to be a surprise.
60 days, you can have a report back on any ideas you can come up with. So ordered. Okay. Item number 6 should be a quick one, I hope.
Item 6, Board of Police Commissioners and City Attorney reports and ordinance relative to modifying the LAMC to facilitate master permitting of automobile parking lots and an abbreviated same-day permitting process for automobile parking lot master permit holders.
Morning.
Good morning, council members, committee members, Deputy City Attorney Brian Satelli.
William Jones from Commission Investigation Division.
Lieutenant Hearn, Commanding Officer, Commission Investigation.
We got the officers here to do the search for the dogs, right? You're already on the case.
We're on it, sir.
If they're in a parking lot, we're in good shape.
Very good.
So what you have in front of you is an amended ordinance change with this master permitting scheme. And the idea is to create a more efficient, more streamlined permitting process approach where you have multiple owners of parking lots. The existing code provides that if you own a parking lot, that you have to go through a fingerprinting process for each time you own the parking lot. And so what this process does is that if you own multiple parking lots, you get a master permit, which only requires fingerprinting once. And then if you want to add additional lots to the parking lot, then you can go to the main office of finance, you identify the lot, you designate a qualified manager so that the police department knows who to go out, who to speak to at the lot, and that you have to be up to date on all your taxes, all your fees, You have to have a complete application on file with the Office of Finance, and that you have to meet the proper zoning requirements. So it's a small amendment to the code. However, I think it will greatly benefit the department and also these auto park owners.
One question I had, and we have a couple of these lot owners that owe the city of LA millions of dollars in
That's
back
correct.
taxes. So if they come in to get fingerprinted, you'll deny it, and then what happens to them?
They will not be able to get the additional lot added to their master program. See, we have that safeguard built into the ordinance that if they're delinquent on any of their taxes or fees, they're not going to be able to add that additional lot. The board, the police commission, still has discretion. And you're correct, council member. We've seen that there are multiple lots out there that are delinquent on their taxes, and we've been taking discipline action on their police permits. We've had a number over the summer which we ended up suspending, and which then they came forward immediately and paid off their outstanding taxes.
So there can be a sharing of information within the department of all these issues, because there's a lot of people that are, if they're already a scofflaw, not paying anyway, just that they're not getting fingerprints, probably not going to urge them to do anything more. But you're going to be sharing information, everybody's going to be on the same page.
Yes,
at the
there's
department.
always an ongoing relationship between Office of Finance and the Commission. Perhaps the Commission could speak to those concerns that council members have.
Well, the plan in its implementation will be that when, say, if it's a operator who does have back taxes and hasn't paid their POT, that the Office of Finance will notify us with that particular application, so that we can let the applicant know that they need to take care of it from our side, as well as Finance, letting them know that.
Thank you. Mr. Reyes? Okay. Mr. Zine?
Good idea.
Mr. Cardenas?
If we make changes and streamline the process, is there a cost benefit to the city when it comes to having a more streamlined process for these permits?
Well, they still have to pay a fee for the permit.
That's what I'm talking about, men and women power. Because the more complicated we make it for the vendor, obviously more paperwork or more hoops they got to go through. The hoops are people, bureaucrats, with the city who have to check things off and read things again, even though they've done it 10 times already.
You're absolutely correct. They will create a more cost-effective, I think, approach for both Office of Finance and the department, because it will save man-hours having to duplicate the forms. They have a master on file, and every time they want to add a new lot, they just go to the master and identify the lot. It's a much more streamlined approach. I think if the commission wants to add any more.
It doesn't make it automatic, though. It just
Correct.
means that there's less bureaucracy involved in the second and third and fourth permits.
Right, you still have the first round of bureaucracy, but then in adding successive lots, it makes it a lot easier.
Okay, thank you.
Do we license the parking lot owner? Almost there, but the attendants, are they licensed? Is there any check on the attendants?
No, there is not.
Do we find problems with that?
Not
operator.
not generally speaking.
It is something that the department has considered of looking into requiring permits for lot attendants.
Especially if it's a valet, because now they have your car, they have your keys, and if there's no kind of a check on those individuals, things somehow disappear.
That's correct.
So that might be something that we could look into, to license them and have the owner of the lot be required to have licensed attendees at the lot. If you wanted to just do it for valet, if a person just watching a lot and not come in contact with the car, but what troubles me is when you go to a valet, they have your car, they have custody of your car, and you don't know who those people are.
Councilmember, I know there had been discussions within the commission about potentially doing a valet permitting type of scheme, which other cities, I think Pasadena has one. It hasn't come to you yet. I think it's still in its earlier stages. This particular ordinance just speaks to the actual property owner.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
I'm trying to extend it out.
Right.
Because this just sparked the idea of, now you know who the owner is, the owner's paying the fee, this and that, he's going to buy 10 or 15 lots. That's fine. But the people who are actually taking custody of the car, especially the valet, the owner hires, has a manager, that guy could just get out of jail for theft, and now he's parking your car and taking everything out of it.
That's great.
Being a police officer for 41 years, you learn the ins and outs, and I just think there might be temptation there where we could protect the public by making sure these people have some kind of a check. You wouldn't want to hire someone in a bank who just got out of jail for bank robbery.
Or car theft.
You wouldn't want to hire someone that, you know, I mean, there's probably a job they can do, but when they're taking custody of your car in a valet, they have full access and custody of your car.
Doesn't happen.
And if you folks are looking into that from the commission?
It is something we're looking into actively right now. That's like phase 2.
Okay.
Looking into these
Okay.
valet
Yeah,
owners.
I didn't want to tread on this one. This is fine. I just thinking down the road, we might want to tighten that up.
And
Just for the consumers, the people of Los Angeles.
So, Councilmember, you know that there's also bond requirements that these lot owners have to carry a certain bond requirement, so in the event their car is stolen, they could have, you know, the aggrieved individual can have a potential case against.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. So if there's no objection, we'll move that to council with approval of the ordinance. So moved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, sorry, Dr. Williams, I'm sorry, I forgot. Right in front of me. Dr. Williams.
Thank you. Public comment.
Does it make any difference if I speak then? Okay.
We could recall the item and re-vote on it. We can recall an item and re-vote on it, correct, Mr. Chairman?
I'm familiar with Roberts.
So it's a rhetorical question?
Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno. Opposed to this because there are three components in commuters. That is price of fuel, availability of road, and parking. LA has one of the cheapest parkings per day in the United States. $3, $4. I can be here. When I do come down by car, I park $3 a day, all day. So that's for commuters. It's not for ins and outs. So this particular expediting of the application for parking lots, temporary, without definition of temporary, should be very expensive. Hey, expediting. If you want a passport in one day, you can get it, but it costs money. If you want your courier package in one day, it costs money. Why expedite the application for additional temporary parking lots without adding a fee to it? Time is money. We had 15 minutes of no committee meeting. That 15 minutes times number of people was probably worth about $1,500. So economics. If they don't need to get it done in a timely fashion, they can take the normal. But please reduce the parking in downtown. Put in more retail in those parking lots, because the parking lots are only being used as holding actions until they can put in retail. So make it more expensive. In San Francisco, $20 a day. Thank you.
Okay. Staff, do you have any response?
Just briefly, there is a provision that discusses temporary permits. It's in 103.06.2. It talks about the temporary permit. In this scheme, it's contemplated they get the same day. On the same day they apply, they get the temporary. However, it still needs to be ratified by the Board of Police Commissioners, the Police Permit Review Panel. So it allows them to operate on the same day they submit the application, because they have a master on file, so we know who we're dealing with. In addition, the fees, they're still going to have to pay the fees. There's no area where they get waived fees for adding additional lots, so that under 103.12, they're still required the additional fees for each lot they add to the master. And this doesn't discuss the commuter issue. This is with the owners. So.
Just in addition, that the sooner that parking lot operator can get up and running on a parking lot, that's sooner notification to the Office of Finance to expecting the POT from that lot.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none.
I second my approval.
The motion still stands. Thank you very much. Item number 1.
Item 1. Communication from the mayor and CAO report relative to recommendations for contract extensions and for new intervention service providers for the 77th and other area gang reduction and youth development zones and related actions.
Borough Taylor from the Sears office. Good morning.
Sergio Samayo with the mayor's office.
The report before you provides recommendations for the mayor's gang reduction and youth development or GREED office to amend 18 contracts and execute one new contract for the 2009-10 GREED program. In March 2009, the mayor's office executed 19 contracts for these services for a term of 6 months, which ended September 30th, 2009. This report provides recommendations to extend 18 of these contracts effective October 1st, 2009 through June 30th, 2010 for a total amount of $5.9 million. One contract, well, the request is to renew one contract for the 77th Division 2 GREED zone. The mayor's office will provide more information on that because there was a change in the service provider. And we recommend approval of these contracts.
Anything else? The real expert in this field, obviously, is Mr. Cardenas, who chaired the ad hoc committee. So, Mr. Cardenas, you want to begin?
Okay. All right, thank you. In the CAO report, it states that the mayor's GRID office will provide a status report on GRID program activities through June 30th of 2009. But that report was supposed to come before the City Council by September of 2009. We're now in October. When will this report be released?
The mayor's office has released the report on the program. Our office is working on the report, and we expect that report to be at the next Public Safety Committee meeting.
Okay. So the CAO has not released its own report?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you. Currently, the prevention contractors receive $1 million per zone, per grid zone, as identified by and designed by the mayor's office, while the intervention contractors receive $500,000. However, intervention agencies are required to maintain a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week schedule to respond to calls regarding gang-related violence. Why is it that we have prevention contracts at $1 million and intervention contracts at $500,000 in the same geographic area?
I'm actually not really prepared to answer a question like that. That was set up at the very beginning of the program. Contract workers are, in terms of intervention workers, because I do look at all the budgets for the intervention workers, they're only required to work a certain number of hours. A lot of them work, a full-time, like 40. A lot of times they're on call where they need to be available at certain times of the day, so there'll be different shifts, and it's up to each of the contractors to schedule and coordinate their contract workers, but they don't actually work the full 24 hours a day although so in other words, although they're supposed to be available 24 hours a day, a lot of the incidents happen, at late at night. There's certain times when these things happen, and they have to be available at all hours of the day in order for them to be able to show up to an incident and file a report and get the information that they need.
Thank you for clarifying my point. And my point is basically this. Prevention programs tend to be 9 to 5. Pretty set hours. They tend to be at locations, they're service providing at a particular building or facility, where intervention has both components. Intervention work has a component of having a base, an office, a place to receive clients, etc. But also, a big component of what they do has to do with being out on the streets, responding to calls, things of that nature. But again, you have the grid zones are one geographic area, so many square blocks. And then within those square blocks, the attention paid to that grid zone by the prevention contractor gets $1 million to pay that kind of attention with that litany of services and attention they're supposed to be giving those constituents in that geographic area. Yet you have intervention programs or providers that are contracted for that same exact space of geographic, so many square blocks, and yet they're getting paid half as much. You just agreed that intervention contractors do in fact find themselves responding to incidents at various hours of the day, pretty much 24/7. For example, this probably doesn't get any more 24/7 than we would need for this conversation or this dialogue. On a Saturday night, or technically Sunday morning at about 12:15 a.m., a 4-month-old baby along with 2 adults were shot. The 2 adults seem to have been able to survive. The 4-month-old baby was pronounced dead at the hospital. Coincidentally, it happened outside of a grid zone. And on top of that, there's no question, you know, I know, and I've talked to Chief Moore, intervention workers were contacted, intervention workers got involved immediately. Are you aware of that incident?
I'm aware because I saw it in the news. I am aware of it.
Who in your office works that area?
This was in the valley, right?
Yes, San Fernando Valley, the Van Nuys community, outside of a grid zone. Is there anybody from the mayor's office here who can shed a little bit of light on that? I apologize. I didn't expect this person not to.
Actually, Mr. Reyes has some similar questions.
Yeah. I didn't expect the mayor's office to send people in who didn't have.
Ernesto Romel Florio, manager for program planning for the grid office. We do have a program manager out there. We actually have 2 in the valley. Hilda Garcia, Fabian Garcia, Panorama City, and also Pacoima.
Other than listening to the news, do you have direct understanding that intervention workers responded immediately to that event?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for your honesty. The last thing I want, and the last thing you ever want to do, with me at least, is wing it. So thank you so much for being honest and saying that the reference of where you know the information and the fact that you didn't know the details. I do appreciate that. Thank you. But that's a perfect example of we're asking providers and we're contracting them to do certain work. We've outlined that work. We've worked more than a couple of years through the policy committees of the city council and working with the mayor's office to develop how we're going to implement, hopefully, this effective violence reduction work. And yet, right now, I'm still perplexed at how or why the mayor's office designed the grid zones so that the prevention programs get $1 million and the intervention programs get $500,000 to work in the same geographic area. So, if you don't have the answer of how that came about, get that answer.
Okay. I'll be glad to provide you with a better explanation than the one I gave you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I understand you weren't here from the beginning, but with all due respect, maybe the mayor's office should send people who've been here from the beginning so that we can have a more fruitful dialogue and a better understanding of what's going on over there. Okay? What steps have been taken to ensure that the information provided by youth taking the Youth Services Eligibility Tool and information gathered by gang interventionists is protected and not subject to being subpoenaed in a court of law or subject to the Public Records Act?
Okay. Well, and just to be clear, that the Youth Services Eligibility Tool is a tool that's used for the prevention providers, and therefore, you know, it's a different category, as we talked a little bit about here. It's from ages 1 to 10. In terms of the Y-set, it is designed so that it could be confidential and that the names are not available to law enforcement. It's done under confidentiality. There's been a number of, and I think this has been talked about in the ad hoc committee of steps that have been taken in order to help the Y-set stand up the test in terms of it being used against, because the credibility of the Y-set, if the kids believe that any information they're going to be used is going to be used against them, they wouldn't do it. In addition to it being confidential, there's
there's tools that are being used so that the kids can be more comfortable with their answers, because in addition to them being worried about their information being used against them, we also want to make sure that they provide accurate answers, that they don't give us something that they think we want to hear.
I appreciate you and I have had this dialogue, and various members of the mayor's team have had this dialogue in the formerly known as the gang committee. That committee no longer exists. So I appreciate you informing the members of this committee who weren't there, but that's not my question. I appreciate you reiterating once again that the mayor's office understands that sensitivity. But what has been done to make sure that we have a definitive line, ultimately, to protect these young 1 to 10-year-olds who answer these questions, so that we don't have an overzealous prosecutor storming into an agency and saying, I want all the questionnaires that you gave to the kids over the last 6 months, knowing that the kid that they're after, that 9-year-old, is one of those questionnaires. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand exactly what they're saying.
I'm glad you understand it, but I want you to answer the question.
Okay.
What is being done to make sure that we define that line?
I came here prepared to talk about the RFP and extending the contracts for the intervention workers.
Now, the YSET is done by, the YSET is performed by contractors that are subject to this item, correct?
No, actually not.
No?
Well,
prevention and intervention.
Prevention and the non-drug, you're right.
Yeah.
Correct.
I appreciate what you were prepared for. But with all due respect, within the scope of that responsibility comes the details of how these contracts are implemented and their effectiveness and their effect on the people that we're trying to help and the communities we're trying to help. So once again, I think you're doing a fine job of being honest with me, but you're not doing a very good job of answering the questions.
Right.
And then also, if you don't have the authority within the mayor's office to tell somebody like me from a committee like this of elected officials that you will take X, Y, Z steps to make sure that you either get the answer or that you agree that a policy matter needs to be applied and that you will go ahead and work on it and come up with a solution. If you don't have the authority, please let me know, because if you don't, then I'm talking to the wrong person.
Yeah, I think you're talking to the wrong person regarding the YSET. Okay. So I'll
Mr. Romel.
There are certain controls that were put in the YSET. I just can't, I can't list them for you. But I'd be glad to do that for you. I'd be glad to get that information for you.
Mr. Hilario, within the mayor's office, who has more authority in the mayor's office between you two gentlemen? You do.
Deputy Director Sergio.
Okay. So you're here to help clarify things if necessary, but you're the man right now from the mayor's office. Okay.
Correct.
And who's above you?
Right now it's Guillermo Cespedes.
And Guillermo Cespedes' title is?
He's the director of the program. Also Mildred Lopez, who's worked directly with the YSET, would be able to get that. That's the person I'd go to be able to find that kind of information to be able to provide for you.
You know what's interesting? When the mayor's office was developing these programs and developing this system, the grid zones and all these efforts, the mayor's office used to send the director, then Jeff Carr, to most of the committees that were hearing these kinds of items. And then as the summer of 2009 came along and the council president announced that the committee structure was going to change and that the gang committee was no longer going to exist, the names and faces of people out of the mayor's office answering questions on these matters changed and the titles reduced in stature. What I hope you understand is, regardless of what titles committees have, the responsibility and the expenditure of funds and the responsibility of saving lives in this city lies with all of the elected officials. And it is up to each elected official to take on their responsibilities and to what seriousness they want to get involved in particular policy matters. And it just so happens that the former chairman of the gang committee is now a member of this committee. So I strongly urge the mayor's office to bring it, to bring the people who know what they're talking about, to bring the people who know how to articulate what's going on. And you and I have had this discussion. I respect your degrees and I respect your title and you are very articulate, but the thing is, the responsibility of the mayor's office, your boss, is to make sure that when you're dealing with the policy body of the city, whether programs are run out of your office or not, if you're going to be at the table testifying before any committee, you need to be ready to answer these kinds of questions. And with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, stop me if I ever ask a question that's out of line. So what are you going to do to assure the policymakers of the City Council that the YSET is doing what it's supposed to do, yet at the same time it doesn't have an inadvertent consequence that may cause inadvertent problems or legal problems for one of these 1 to 10-year-olds?
I think a lot of these issues had been worked through, and I'd be happy to answer any YSEC questions that you have, to get it to you in writing or verbally. I just don't have the information right now as to the YSEC and what some of the...
Unfortunately, we are not in my office. This is not an individual discussion between Councilman Tony Cardenas and a question or a matter that I might have. You're before a committee of the council.
I understand.
Before the public and before this committee, and I'm asking you a public question. I'm more than happy to do that. I mean, I'll save my question for later.
Yeah, I just want, out of due respect to the whole process, and I think your message is very loud and clear, and evidently I believe you're getting what's being said by the committee members, and it's important to have someone who can respond. I mean, I had 6 shootings in one setting in Highland Park this past weekend. I have people dying in my district. And so the gravity of this is very serious. So if we can have someone here that can provide us, now again, not to take anything from you, sir, because I know you're in the hot seat right now. And my wish is not to make you uncomfortable. It is very uncomfortable for us to have to respond in a manner that is of substance to the question. So maybe we should continue, Mr. Chair.
What I was going to suggest, while initially really this report is about the financial considerations, they're tied to program.
Sure.
And I was surprised to know that the new director has not met with members of this committee yet. So I would like to take this off for 2 weeks if we could, and have the director and the new director, Guillermo, please meet with all members of this committee. I've already met with them, but obviously there's some very specific questions, particularly Mr. Reyes and Mr. Cardenas have, and I presume Mr. Zine as well. And then we'll have this back in committee. All right? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 2.
Item 2, Department of Animal Services report relative to procedures for the department's handling of dangerous animals and to provide the Board of Animal Services with the discretion to modify Department General Manager orders to euthanize dogs for good cause.
Chair, do you want to go closed session?
Well, I was going to ask if anybody sees a need to go in closed session on this. If not, I don't see a need personally, but...
Well, council members, I can go, I'll just give you a little bit of background on this decision, and then, depending on your question.
Well, let me just ask, Dov, do you think there's a need for an executive session on this?
The executive session would be very narrowly limited to liability issues that may result from going in a certain direction. Otherwise, if this is a direction that the committee wants to go to anyways without a presentation of the potential liability to the city, then the closed session would not be necessary.
So I can give you a rundown on those.
Let's start down, and if we run into that trouble, then we'll
see where that goes. What you have before you is a recommendation that was made by the Animal Services Commission in response really to a unique case. And I will say that I do believe it is genuinely unique. There's been some allusions to something similar in the past, but no factual basis for that. And that relates to a dog named Stu, who was declared dangerous by the Department of Animal Services. Just going to give you the quick background. This dog, as well as some other dogs that were owned by Mr. Jeffrey De La Rosa, were picked up at large several times, and there had been incidents, not with this particular dog, but with others, and this dog remaining at large. There was a serious bite incident in August of 2005. That led to the dog was impounded. The dog and the owner was subject to a dangerous dog hearing in December of 2005, at which time, based on the seriousness of the bite, or about 60 stitches in a young woman's arm, the dog was declared dangerous. Under the Los Angeles Municipal Code, a dog that is declared dangerous is to be euthanized. It's very clear-cut code language. The matter was appealed to the Board of Animal Services Commissioners. In March of 2006, the Commission upheld the decision of the General Manager declaring the dog dangerous. The owner of the dog went to Superior Court. In July of 2007, the Superior Court of Los Angeles found that the department had acted properly in declaring the dog dangerous and conducting the hearing. The owner went to the Court of Appeal, and in June of 2009, the Court of Appeals did not overturn the decision of the lower court. So that decision stands, that the department acted properly. For about the first this has now been 4 years then since the original incident on which the dog was found dangerous. For the first 2 years, the dog was held at animal care centers. For about the last 2 years, he's been held by a very well-respected local dog trainer, and there have been no incidents as far as bites in that time frame. The dog has not bitten anyone else, but he has been held as the judicial process went through its system. Particularly in the last year or so, there has been a lot of movement on the part of our animal services commissioners. A lot of information is circulated, a lot of public input, but the bottom line for our commission was Los Angeles is trying to be a progressive leader in humane issues. We are trying to become a no-kill city. And with that idea in mind, is there something that this city can do in regards to this dangerous dog, in this case, besides perform euthanasia on the dog? Is there an alternative besides killing in this case? And that is what our board has been talking several closed sessions with the city attorney, has been working with staff, has been taking quite a number of public hearings. What are some alternatives that would allow acknowledgement of the dangerous dog case and yet allow an alternative besides killing? And that is what prompted then the board in July to recommend to council, well, what if there were an alteration, an amendment to the municipal code that would make a small change to the existing dangerous animal and license revocation practices to allow the board to reconsider a case long after the decision has been made, and otherwise the matter would be closed because of extenuating information or because of a change in climate or because they've learned some new information. That is what is before you today. Again, with respect to trying to convey to you that our board is acknowledging of the process that has taken place and has had quite a bit of consultation with the city attorney in regards to liability depending on the action that's taken. But their overall concern is there an alternative for this dog in this case? And is amending the municipal code the way to get there? Or that's what they've recommended, but that is their goal. And I don't know if the city attorney might have something to add.
Right. And I think initially it was the board's decision to move forward with this proposed ordinance, language change, et cetera, upon review, as a way of avoiding euthanasia, as Linda stated. The research that we did indicates that that change would not change the potential liability to the city, but it doesn't change the underlying desire, which is nobody really wants to destroy this dog. Is there some way that we could go forward? And I believe that there is a draft motion that you have a copy that would indicate some of the department's approaches. Again, there is some liability involved in that, and the purpose of the closed session on your agenda is if you wanted additional information from our office as to what kind of liability that would entail. However, changing the ordinance or changing the municipal code, okay, I'm advised it may or may not. But changing the municipal ordinance may or may not change that liability either. And so we can proceed without changing the ordinance. The main thing that I think that the department wanted was some indication from the committee that we should find some way to avoid euthanizing the dog, even if it might entail some additional liability risk to the city.
And I think the bottom line is you can only tell us our odds of getting success in court. You can't guarantee it, so.
Correct.
I think that's the bottom line.
I've got a couple.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Stein.
This has been going on since 2005. How much money have we spent in litigation and in this custody of the dog for the last 2 years and the 2 years it was with Animal Services? How much have we spent on this?
I don't know if Animal Services has a reckoning of the costs. Obviously, there were costs involved. There have been no out-of-pocket costs to the department during the time that, the last 2 years, that the dog has been at the private kennel.
The private kennel's not charging?
That's correct.
And then 2 years that the dog was with Animal Services?
Whatever their daily or monthly rate is for keeping a dog, and especially a dog that is deemed dangerous, would probably cost them more than the cost of keeping just a run-of-the-mill dog.
How old is the dog?
Well, we don't know the exact age. Estimate maybe 9 years old at this time.
9 years old? And what type of dog is it?
It's a lab mix, maybe with a bit of pit bull, the lab mix. Labrador mix, excuse me.
And the 60 stitches, the lady in 2005 who was bitten, did she file a lawsuit against anyone?
She did. She filed a lawsuit against the owner of the dog and was ultimately, it was settled between the insurance company and various attorneys. I understand that she settled for $300,000, but that was not part of the case at the time we had the dangerous dog hearing, because that had not settled yet.
So the lady who was bitten filed a lawsuit, $300,000 taking care of her issues, dangerous dog, and it went up through the Court of Appeals, and all through the process, it was determined that it's a dangerous dog.
Yeah, the court determined that the department had acted properly, is what they actually
By
do.
declaring it a dangerous dog.
That is correct.
And now, for the last 2 years, or the last 4 years, it's been held by Animal Services for 2 and a private facility for 2, and it remains with that private facility.
That is correct.
What's the liability if that dog is returned to the owner and the dog bites someone?
So that, again, that would be the subject of the closed session.
Okay, what if that dog is returned to the owner and the dog escapes? And then is it loose in the city?
Same thing.
I'm just asking for liability, not a value.
There is potential liability, and that would be discussed in closed session, or there may be potential liability, but that would be the subject of the closed session.
Okay. And other than euthanasia, are there any other provisions Animal Services has for a dog that's declared dangerous?
Not in the current municipal
Not currently.
And that's what this ordinance wants to change.
And this ordinance would change that, but would that prevent or protect the city in liability?
We'll get to that afterwards.
That would be a closed session item as well.
All right, good. So I guess we're going to do closed session.
I guess so. Mr. Cardenas?
Generic question, closed session questions. About how many red zone, I call this a red zone dog, okay? You follow me? If they're dangerous and then it's deemed that they need to be euthanized because they're too dangerous, right? I call it a red zone. So my question is, how many red zone cases do we have? Not litigation cases, but I'm talking on the department. How many red zone cases do we have a year where we have to euthanize for red zone purposes?
Maybe
1, 10,
one or
50,
two.
100?
1 or 2 a year.
So we're talking less than 10 a year.
Absolutely.
And we're dealing with tens of thousands of dogs and cats a year.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay. Got it. All right. Put that into that perspective. Secondly, while we have litigation, this to both of you, while we have litigation pending or there's a reason for or a court case or something, and then we have animals that are evidence animals. Who's picking up the cost for the care and maintenance and supervision of those animals?
An animal that's held for evidence, for example, Animal Cruelty Task Force or a case, when the case is resolved, if the owner in fact gets the animals back, they pay the cost.
For whether it's a week or 10 weeks or 10 months that the animals will do
Or
that?
sometimes can be a very long period of time. Sometimes we try to work out a payment plan.
And we have a
if
set
necessary.
rate? But we negotiate, I'm sure, depending on the case, but we have a set daily rate or something?
Yeah, we actually do have a daily rate. It's about $14 a day for a dog.
But meanwhile, until there is that kind of a settlement at the end of the day, it is a cost to the department.
Yes.
To your department?
That's correct.
Not the city attorney's office?
Correct.
Okay. Well, let Mr. Tutanich know that I'm going to consider whether or not I'm going to move a motion that in those cases that the city attorney's office retroactively absorb those costs and reimburse the department if in fact we can't get it from the third party, et cetera. Unfortunately, for the city attorney's office, I personally believe, and I'm probably wrong, you probably have a little bit more flexibility in your budgets than we now have left this department with. And thank God it's less than 10 animals a year anyway. Thanks.
For the record, Mr. Tutanich has gone on record, he has no money to pay for toner or for Xerox paper, and his budget was cut 20 or 30%, some outrageous amount of money, as I recall him making public statements to that.
He can get in a crybaby line with the other 40 general managers.
But he didn't blame you, Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chairman, a point of clarification on that. But isn't it the case that categorically in the city attorney's office, when it comes to actual cases and handling cases, that there is different categories of funds that the department sets aside annually for those purposes? Not specifically for animals, but you get what I'm saying.
Yes, Lori Rittenberg, City Attorney's Office. When there are special funds, sometimes if there's a lawsuit, we have to settle a lawsuit or pay a judgment. There are special funds in various departments, like sanitation has a lot of special funds, sewer fund, solid waste fund. If there's funds from bonds, there's just funds from fees that are collected. And normally, if it's a breach of contract case, for example, there's usually obviously funding for that contract. Almost all of the time, the department involved in the breach will use the funds, either their contract funds or any of their funds, to pay the liability payment for that. The only time the city attorney's office pays out of the general fund, the city attorney liability fund, is if it's a non-special funded situation. And that's very often, and you probably come across that a lot.
And more often. And that's why I'm not making a motion today, right? I want to find out how we operate as a city, how your department operates, how the city attorney's office operates, and what kind of availability may be accessible so that we can actually handle this and handle it as appropriately as possible. So that's why I'm not making a motion today. I want to make sure I get educated by your department and also by your department and anybody else who can shed some light on how we can build a better mousetrap when it comes to this kind of situation. Okay? Thank you.
And council members, I do have some photographs of the original injury, which I'll pass around. I just have one set.
We have two public comments. I'll call forward Phyllis Doherty and Jeff De La Rosa.
Jeffrey De La Rosa, and Stu is actually my dog. I have to object to Ms. Barth's photographs of the original case without all the other information that goes with the case. She has completely misrepresented, one, what happened in the case. She likes to persuade you to believe that this dog was out running loose and bit somebody. That's not what happened. The dog bit my assistant in a confined area because he was injured, because she tried to get him to the vet. It was a very quick thing that she turned into a payday. The board is not here. I would ask you to ask the board why all five of them, asked you to consider an amendment to the municipal code. What Ms. Barth is also not telling you is that the other dog, and there were not a lot of dogs, the other dog, the Superior Court did overturn the department because they denied due process. And the exact same hearing examiner heard both cases. The problem in Stu's case, which the hearing examiner did not declare him dangerous, it was the general manager who, after being influenced by an intermediary, declared the dog dangerous. There isn't anyone in this city with any credibility that thinks this dog's dangerous. In fact, experts have come forth, PhDs have come forth to say this dog's not dangerous, never should have been declared dangerous, and Mr. LaSalle, Ms. Barth are misrepresenting what the board has heard over the last 4 years, what has actually occurred over the last 4 years, and what the board's intentions are in this proposed ordinance. So I would ask you to table this issue, bring the board here, or an officer of the board, and say, what's this about? Because this is not what's it about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Doherty.
Right. Phyllis Doherty, the Animal Issues Movement. I'm not a party to this in any way. I have heard most of it at the commission meeting, so I'm not speaking on this particular thing, but the item that's on the agenda, which is the decision of whether or not to change the ordinance. The only thing that I will say in this particular case, from what I heard and from my experience with the city, is that the problem basically is that we've had a series of general managers who do not know city policy, rules, and laws, and we have commissioners who have no animal control experience, period, and the decisions are being made on emotion. Now, I'm not saying that their emotion is what caused them to bring this in, but in general, that's why you do not get clear-cut decisions on these, and it leads to these liability issues and these prolonged cases. The appeals are not appeals. They turn into a complete retrying of what happened and who liked their dog better and who didn't like their dog. And a couple of the commissioners have even said that they will not take a dog away from anyone under any circumstance. They will not revoke a license. Well, bottom line is that the department is there and the commission is there for public safety. And it's sad when a dog has to be euthanized, but there are dogs that are psychopathic, the same as there are people that are psychopathic. And certainly there are cases where the owner has an influence on the behavior of the dog, more the owner has the influence on whether or not the dog has contact with people off the property, which are what will cause it to most often to attack. Like I said, I'm not talking about the instances of this, but until we correct the situation to where we hire somebody to run this department who knows what the city laws and policy are and how they should be followed, and get commissioners that are not rescue people, you're going to continue to have these problems. In this case, I do believe that an employee made an administrative error. Had it been a general manager that knew how it should have been handled, this would not have happened probably in the first place.
Thank you very much. And for the record, what is before us today is only a change in the ordinance, not the case of the dog in question. That has been adjudicated in the courts of law, and that is not our function here in this committee to change that ruling or comment on it. What is before us today is a change of the ordinance, which would hopefully tighten up the ordinance so that these circumstances won't exist and the particular dog in question doesn't have to be put to sleep, which our ordinance requires. So that's what is before us. With that, would you read for the audio record the relevant section of code, and we'll go into executive session.
The public safety recesses to closed session pursuant to government code sections or section 54956.9B to confer with the city attorney on this item.
Everyone, please leave the room. That's not
On the air.
We're on the air. All right, back in an open session, and the committee is going to take the language that was presented by the department on how to resolve this with a new motion, no ordinance. There were some issues that were discussed in executive session that we asked the city attorney to work with the department on and bring this back with a final ordinance at a later time. So we will instruct the city attorney to bring us back a final ordinance based on this language as well as the other concerns that were addressed on liability. Pardon me?
How long?
Yeah, how long do you think, the city attorney?
It would really depend on how many other issues are tied in with the same, whether it's a narrowly drafted matter or whether it includes some of the other issues that the department has that it would like to explore within this context. If it's the latter, it may take a little bit longer because we would need to bring that, especially that part, to the commission to make sure that they are clear on their instructions to us.
Okay.
That latter would probably take us maybe 90 days, especially with the holidays coming up.
My concern is that we have discussion with the department over the current status of Stu the dog in question and the fact that the current possessor of the dog may not wish to continue that role for very long. So.
And we would take that into consideration in terms of our turnaround to come back to this.
So expeditiously, you'll return as quick as possible, and we'll wait.
No later than 90 days.
90 days is a goal, no outside goal. Then, right. You have any other?
That's very well. Good.
Okay.
Just general comment.
All right, and that'll be it for today. And then the last item on is general comment. Dr. Williams?
I'd just like to clarify earlier, the actress Jaja Gabor's name was brought up. It was Ava Gabor who passed away. May she rest in peace, and Jaja's doing just fine.
Dr. Williams?
Good afternoon. I like dogs, but I don't participate in dog deals. Cats, yes. Okay. Los Angeles Fire Department. They're having brownouts. They're having engine relocations due to the brush fire. They have a lot of costs. Okay. Brush clearance. Very simple. If the brush clearance guidelines are appropriate and enforced, there's no need for brush fire seasons. There's no need for reallocation of the engines because of brush fires, if they are enforced and if they're appropriate. If they're not appropriate to prevent fires, fire prevention rather than controlled suppression, then maybe they should be changed. If they're not being enforced, that's a more serious matter because we're putting at risk our firefighters, but also unknown budget requirements. So I would highly recommend that the committee consider reviewing the brush clearance to make sure that it's appropriate, review the enforcement, which frankly is totally inadequate, and charge appropriate fees for those areas that are not in compliance, and perhaps also put a liability that if a fire occurs in an area which has not been cleared properly, then the cost of that fire suppression should be allocated to the owners where the fire starts. Structures are better than brush. We need to put our resources against structures, not for the brush clearance, if the rules are applied and enforced. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that ends the committee for today. Thank you very much.